Good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainability series. My name is Lee Timms. I'm from Clarity Sustainability, a green marketing and sustainability communications agency based just outside of London in the UK. So today's topic is driving sustainability. It is the first of 5 parts of our webinar series stretching through the green marketing life cycle, throughout which we'll be using the Sustainability hashtag. Please use this for all your comments, questions and any case studies that you can add to the webinars. So today's agenda is that after a brief introduction we'll have Michelle Campbell-Robson from IEMA, who will start talking to us about management systems. We'll then go on to cover waste, energy and water reduction from RAP-EON and Ideal Standard. After which we will take your questions for a few minutes and we'll close just after an hour's time. So we start with environmental management and the sustainability on site within organisations today, because that's where there's an awful lot of impacts, but also because before we go into the communications themselves, we want to make sure that we've got good, effective, strong, believable and sincere grounding in what we're doing as organisations. We further this in the second webinar with Cranfield University helping us to look at sustainable innovation and how a large percentage of the impact of products and services could be mitigated at the design stage itself. We then look to broaden the engagement and actual communications in the third webinar. This is where we look at green marketing claims, substantiation, making sure that we've got that right before we also tackle things like eco-labels, segmentation and targeting of the demographic, practices that work and how we can avoid greenwash. We also cover things like how we produce collateral with minimum environmental impact where possible. In the fourth webinar we see how we can broaden this message out onto PR and social media effectively to widen the engagement. And finally we look at how reporting can go beyond the traditional formats to something that's multimedia and becomes very much an ongoing two-way dialogue with all stakeholders. So we haven't been on the earth an awful long time as humans comparatively, but what we have made, particularly since the Industrial Revolution, since a more consumer society has existed, is an awful lot of impact. This has led to an awful lot of issues, including changes in species, sea level rises and a global temperature change. The graph to the side of this slide actually shows the correlation between parts per million in carbon and the temperature of the climate. We're using a working definition of sustainability from the Brundtland report for this series, meeting our needs of the present without compromising the ability of future meeting of these needs. And we also reference the triple bottom line perspective coined by John Elkington, people, planet and profit. So what is sustainability? It's a term that we've created for this webinar to describe the challenge that we believe we have as marketers, CSR and environmental professionals. We believe it's a challenge of engagement, education and empowerment. We believe that through sincere green marketing efforts we can build engagement between people and brands, products and services through giving them the right choices, through giving them the knowledge, the empowerment and tools to be able to act on this. And this isn't just a supplier-customer relationship, we're looking at all our different stakeholders across the board. So now, without further ado, I'll introduce Michelle Campbell, who's going to talk to us about environmental management.
Hi, my name is Michelle Campbell. I am a senior environmental consultant with a company called the Environmental Academy. We are based in Gateshead near Newcastle. I'm also a member of the IEMA steering group. That's the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. I've been writing environmental management systems for a long time, and I think these bullet points are the best way to describe one. It's a tool to control, improve, manage, and monitor. We have to do all of these things with our environmental aspects and impacts. All management systems, including an environmental management system, is based off of plan, do, check, and act. This is a cycle that all businesses should try to incorporate to ensure the efficient running of them. The engine that drives plan, do, check, and act is continual improvement. Without continual improvement, this cycle would fall down, it would stop. Let's talk about the benefits of doing this, of thinking about resource efficiency, of thinking about environmental management. Well, there's three main ones that I see over the years of doing it, is profitability, ensuring compliance, and the wider corporate responsibility agenda that is becoming more mainstream now. So let's explore these a little bit more. Profitability or financial benefits. This first benefit is all of the resource efficiency improvements. Then if we do all of this environmental work, we're avoiding and reducing risk, but we're also improving our credentials to help win new clients and retain existing clients. Secondly, you've got the legal case. There are over 200 pieces of environmental legislation in the UK. These are just a small selection of them. And finally, let's look at the corporate responsibility. People don't want to work for a polluting employer, so they want to work for a good employer that thinks about the environment as a business objective. If we win more work because of our environmental credentials, it'll increase our employees' job security. Okay, let's look at some types of environmental management systems. This type was actually championed by the IEMA, well drafted and championed by the IEMA. ACORN, if you can see down there at the bottom, was a working group that developed this standard. This standard is a British standard called 855. And this is a phased implementation for an EMS. This is good for smaller companies that may not want to take on the entire task at one time, or smaller companies that may only want certain elements of an EMS. So it is a good reference document as well. I highly recommend that you download and read this, because if you've never been exposed to EMS, this is a good how-to guide. Secondly, we also have this one called Eco Management Audit Scheme. This one is actually voluntary EU legislation. So you can download this for free from the Europa website. If you download and read it, you will find that it is very, very similar to the most popular EMS standard, 14001. But what makes it more strict is that it requires the company to publish an environmental statement on their performance. So it is the stricter big sister of BS 855 and 14001. Local councils tend to go for this in the UK, and it's also very popular in Germany. Finally, I wanted to speak about the most popular standard, 14001. 14001 is the most recognized way to implement an EMS in the world. There are hundreds of thousands of companies that have this certification. One of the highest countries, the highest country in the world that has the highest number of certifications is China. Japan is number 2, and the UK is number 3. So it is a business culture in this country to implement an environmental management system. These are the parts of an EMS. So how do we do this with regards to an EMS? Well, let's think about plan, do, check, and act. Okay? So we want to get an overall picture. We want to walk around the site. We want to gather data. How much are we consuming and spending on energy, waste, water, materials? Then you want to look at where you can prioritize areas for action. How much is it costing you? Is it a legal requirement? Is there environmental risk there? Then you put those goals in that order. One company I work with, I mentioned earlier, electricity, their second biggest spend. So that was one of their top priorities because they needed to reduce that cost. As a company, we want to look at environmental objectives to reduce. Okay? We want to think about short-term goals first, things like an awareness campaign, things like working with your suppliers. Then you want to monitor and measure that, maybe to capture any monetary savings. Then take those monetary savings into low-cost environmental goals. Then you can get more and more benefits, so it becomes a chain reaction. Leading on from that, this slide explores that a bit more. These are things to consider. Pollution prevention measures are a good place to start because you should see those as the basics. We want to ensure our company does not pollute outside of the law. Good storage of chemicals, spill kit training, ensuring that we have, the right drains in the right places, ensuring that we're not pouring anything down drains or down water courses or contaminating land. Once we have that as a standard practice, then we know we're reducing our risk of being prosecuted. You can also think about the biodiversity of the site. Do you have an area where you can enhance with native landscaping? That will always be an environmental benefit. Think about your stakeholders. Employees, communities, and regulators can maybe aid you with ideas and point you in the right direction with environmental goals. You will always have to train and develop your staff. The more your staff are aware of the environment, the more they will be able to contribute to the EMS. The same with motivation and awareness raising. Green procurement and sustainable procurement is a good way to influence and also see environmental improvements. So you can engage with your suppliers. On the right-hand side, I have a word, SMART. While thinking about these objectives and targets to consider, remember they always must be specific, measurable, achievable, responsibility assigned, and time-bound. Always put them in that SMART method. That's when they will be successful. Okay. Remember, we have to manage the system. And I spoke to you about the basic process of EMS. But these bullet points are some more hints and tips. Make sure you know the scope of your system and you work within the parameters of your scope. You must have a coordinator or somebody that's a leader of the EMS. Okay? Earlier I mentioned going for short-term goals. That aids in confidence building and showing that the EMS is an effective thing to do. You always will have to collaborate with experts. I'm a consultant and I talk with people more experienced than me all of the time. It's just the nature of the job. So don't be scared to do that. The same with local knowledge. Stakeholder engagement helps with that. You have to set roles and responsibilities. If that's not clear from the EMS, lack of ownership is a big weakness in a lot of people's EMS, and it eventually becomes ineffective. Okay? Training should occur throughout that whole process. There are barriers. Life doesn't exist in a vacuum, so you'll have to anticipate those barriers. But don't let that take away the encouragement and the confidence of the EMS. Always to have management reviews. But don't just report back to senior management. Also think about middle management, supervisors, and individuals that may have contributed on a smaller scale. This will develop your process and make a mature EMS. Okay? Never take people out of the equation. You have to engage employees. When I read EMSs and they seem to take people out of the equation, it's not a very good EMS. It is the sinew that keeps it together. So these bullet points give you hints and tips on how to include them in the equation. Senior buy-in all the way down to constant communication, relevant mix of communication as well though. Have green champions, people that, you know, seem keen to get involved. It's essential. So that's how an environmental management system helps with resource efficiency, looking at waste minimization, and how it just ties everything together that the previous speakers have touched on. I also said I was going to tell you about the first documented requirement of the environmental management system, which is the policy. The policy is the shop front of your EMS. It is a strategic, broad statement. So these bullet points here that I've given you are a good audit checklist to ensure that your policy is a good one.
Thank you, Michelle. That's really helpful. Now we've got Simon Drury, and he's going to talk to us about resource efficiency.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Simon Drury. I'm going to give you a talk really from behalf of RAP in relation to resource efficiency and looking at resource efficiency and how resource efficiency can effectively improve your business performance over time. So what I want to start off with is really start by looking at the national picture in terms of the resources that are being utilised. And what we find is when the analysis was carried out, I think back in 2009, what we found was the UK was utilising around about 600 million tonnes of non-fossil fuel resources, the majority of which coming from the UK. And that was producing around about 342 million tonnes of waste per year, that our current consumption. But now that's obviously a significant volume of waste, and of that we were recycling around about 110 tonnes of that. So significant resources. Now business has got a role to play in that, and UK businesses currently we're producing around about 48 million tonnes of waste. But the good news is businesses are currently recycling around about 52% of their total waste volume. Now that is significant improvement on previous years or previous surveys. So you know the industry is going in the correct direction with that. And then of that we're finding that commercial businesses are currently landfilling still around about 24% of their total waste. Now, through analysis of this, and we're looking at those things, what we found is that businesses in the UK can save around about £22 billion from improved resource efficiency within their businesses through low-cost, no-cost activities. So let's have a look at how businesses are doing it. Let's have a look at some of the issues. Now, what we find is if you talk to businesses about waste, is what they're actually doing, is what they talk about is the cost of waste on their organisation is the cost of landfill tax, the cost of the waste contractor to take it away. And they're consistently underestimating the value of waste by not understanding or not quantifying the hidden costs of waste on your organisation. So understanding them and quantifying out the costs that you've embedded in that product before you convert it into waste, or that resource and turned into waste, is going to be important. You know, if you bring a resource into your business and you heat it up, you water it, you clean it, and you process it, and the man walks around the factory with it, and then at the end of all those processes, you convert that, then becomes waste. You've embedded a lot of cost in that material prior to it becoming the overall cost of waste in your organisation. And what we find is organisations generally underestimate the cost of waste by tenfold. The true cost of waste to an organisation is 10 times what most organisations expect it to be. Now that equates to, and if we look at that in terms of turnover, that most organisations, the cost of waste on most organisations is 4% of their turnover. Doesn't sound much, does it? But actually if you look at that and analyse that, what that means is your organisation is working for 2 weeks of every single year purely to cover the cost of waste on your resources and the materials that you're utilising, to cover the cost of waste. Then all of a sudden it becomes an important resource. Now, having a waste problem, and as we said, most organisations now in the UK are recycling, and most businesses are recycling. As I say, with commercial and industrial, 52% of their materials are currently being recycled. But actually what that tells me is, it tells me that actually a lot of organisations are saying we've got waste, what can we do with it, and are looking for resources and looking for solutions to that waste issue that they've got, and then finding recycling. What we want to help you to do is to start thinking really by looking at the waste hierarchy and move from the top of the waste hierarchy down. In that way, you will optimize the financial benefit to your organization, limit and minimize the amount of waste generated by your organization and the costs of waste to your organization. The cheapest resource your organization will ever find is the one that it doesn't have to use. So identifying how you can develop processes, materials and products, and designing out consumption of resources from those products while still maintaining the product quality, performance and value is an important way of doing that. So let's look at some examples. Let's go through the waste hierarchy with some illustrations of what other organizations have done. So Rigby Taylor. Rigby Taylor provide sports and turf equipment for the industry and for the leisure industry, including a lot of the major football clubs. They looked at their white lining equipment and their white lining products. And instead of providing white lining products in powder form and then in diluted product form literally in 15-litre drums, they then moved to a new system, a spray concentrate, which sprayed the white lines onto football pitches. Now that product significantly made savings, not only in terms of the fact that they were able then to transport the much lower volume packaging in lorries, reducing their haulage costs, they also reduced their storage costs. Because the product was easier to store and didn't contain much water, etc., they were actually then increased sales. So the impact on the business over time was significant in terms of what they did. Also aided them to look at their distribution processes and change the way that they distributed within their organization. So in terms of what that did, that prevention of resources had a significant impact. Look at Denso and what Denso did in terms of what their products. They were using paper towels to mop up oil and moved over to oily rags and moved over to rags, cotton rags for that. That meant that they were able to remove a waste stream from their processes, i.e. the paper, and moving over to the cotton rags meant that they were then able to recover those and recycle them, wash them and bring them back into the business and use them time and time again. Again, significant savings. Duco, looking at their products and looking at their services, looked at their drums. They provide cables, electrical cables and communications cables on steel drums. Their steel drums were not reusable and were creating an issue to their customers in terms of creating a recycled waste stream. So they looked at the design of the drums. They redesigned the drums. Not only did they redesign the drums so they were able to reuse them more and more, but actually they made them safer and easier to use for the handlers and for their customers, reducing the business risk and hazard. So again, significant savings again across their business, both in terms of the actual product and creating a recyclable and reusable product, but also in terms of health and safety. Now let's look at a smaller business, and Strattons Hotel in Swaffham. And the Strattons Hotel looked at their product and their services that they were providing to their customers, and significantly reduced the amount of waste that they were generating. Now they did this through lots of simple measures in terms of food waste, but also looking at the products they were providing in the bathrooms to their customers. And instead of providing individual pots of shower gel and body lotions, etc., they moved to one simple product that was in a refillable container, significantly reducing the amount of plastic waste they were producing and also the amount of detergent waste and cleaning products they were throwing away each week and each year. So again, significant savings and improved the guest experience within the hotel. Move down from recycling, let's move down and reducing waste and preparing for reuse. Let's move down to recovery now, another recovery. Now Ginster's Hotel, Ginster's pasties factory in Cornwall, they developed within their processes an anaerobic digestion plant for the management of their food waste that was generated from their production. That site generates electricity, which they were able to sell onto the grid, but also generates a compost and fertilizer for agricultural land, which they can either sell then or give to the local farmers, and creating a closed loop. Those waste streams now are generating an income to the factory rather than a cost of disposal. Warren Evans, looking at their processes, better ventilation systems, removing dust from the factory floor, improving the environment for their staff to work in, created heat recovery processes from the process in the factory, and greater space heating, reduced and recovery of heat and costs, reducing the amount of wood waste from their site by over 70% through things such as things like combined heat and power plant, etc. So again, improve savings from greater recovery of waste and improvements in their overall efficiencies as a process, just through simple measures. Now, those are just some examples of the things that you can do with your waste prior to thinking about how you can recycle it in order to make sure that you actually minimize the amount of waste that you're and the amount of material that you're having to either throw away, dispose of, or indeed recycle. So thinking about how you can do, so thinking about those processes and what those plants have done, thinking about simple measures that you can do within your organization, within your business, will help you to do that. How can you make your processes leaner? How can you make your processes and think about the materials that are utilized within your processes, both in terms of the embedded in the product, but also in the facilitation of the development of that product or service, and how can you make them leaner and greener and utilize less resources? Thinking about how you can substitute materials. If you've got materials that are particularly harmful and create hazardous waste, how can you manage those and reduce them through substitution? Are you over specifying the amount of packaging that your product needs? Are you over providing resources in terms of the products and services that you're providing? Thinking about how you can how you can reduce the amount of waste being generated. Thinking about how you can redirect the waste that you're producing. So your waste may be somebody else's product. So how can you facilitate that? Looking at processes such as industrial symbiosis and linking into the government's NIST program would help you in order to identify out what resources you can actually create and sell on to other customers and other people within the wider UK industry. Thinking about dematerialisation of services, thinking about how your products and services, or indeed how your premises in your factory, are actually generating and creating waste in what they do. So, for example, say you may be in a very inefficient building that through simple insulation, or have processes that are wasting heat with uninsulated pipework, etc., or steam, or indeed compressed air. How you can manage those to create a more sustainable building or a sustainable process within your organisation to reduce those overall cost of resources. Just because it's always been the same doesn't mean to say that it's efficient and can't be improved. So thinking about your consumption of resources, thinking about your consumption strategies, and how you're optimizing the life of the products and services that you're providing, improving the efficiencies of those products and services. So you're creating products that can be upgraded and refreshed or updated with new pieces of hardware or new pieces of equipment, rather than just straight replacement for those products. Think about those goods and services that you're providing and how they can be improved. If, for example, you're in the hotel or food industry or quick service restaurant industry, thinking about those food waste from your products, thinking about portion control, portion size, analysing the waste that comes back from your customers in your restaurants, so that you're looking and understanding what is the main waste coming back. If that side salad is always on the plate when it's returned back to the kitchen, think about why you need that side salad at all, and what value that side salad's adding to you. Are you getting large volumes of waste coming back because your portions control is out of kilter with what your customers are expecting? Thinking about how you can add value to the products and services, and thinking about within your organization how you can utilize this engagement, your activities, and how you can utilize that to sell your products more efficiently. How can you tell your customers about what you're doing and what you're achieving? More and more the public sector is looking towards sustainable practices and sustainability and integrated sustainability and sustainable resource use into their purchasing decision processes. Can you utilize that? Can you utilize your engagement in order to sell more to your customers? Lots of ideas, lots of initiatives, lots of simple ways of winning benefits and creating benefit to your business, both in terms of the value of the cost of resources that you're buying in, also the cost of disposal of those resources once you've created the waste. Thinking about what you can do there will significantly help you. But thinking about that and how you can create that into a management system or a management process for your organization so it's more sustainable over time, will obviously be important to you. Whether that's through the development of a formal or informal environmental management system such as ISO 14001, or indeed your own individual business-related organizational structure, will help you to maintain engagement, to improve and to monitor your performance, to make sure the things that you do and the activities that you take on will deliver the savings and the benefits that you expected from them when you started those programs. So thinking about all of these things, thinking about the processes and activities that your organisation can do, thinking about the management and the management of those processes within your organisation will help you to deliver savings. But of course, along the way, there will always be issues that you will need to address. You will have problems that you will need answers to. Ring up the RAP advice line. Speak to the advisors there. They are there to help you for all of these issues. Provide you with the right materials you need, the right guidance, the right templates, the right tools in order to help you to develop and work through your resource efficiency engagement. Ring up the advice line, visit the RAP website. There is plenty of support to help you to improve your overall productivity. And remember, if there's £22 billion worth of savings being made through resource efficiency activities, low cost, no cost activities, your business really needs to be part of that and gain some of that. With that, I'd like to end this presentation. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand back to the team now that's running this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. There's some really good hints and tips in there. I think that was really going to help our attendees. Don't forget that you can send all your questions and comments in on the SustainAffinity hashtag on Twitter or using the webinar module on your screen. Be really interested to see what you think. Send in the questions and we'll cover those at the end of the presentation. So now we've got Rachel Hodge, Communications Manager at E.ON, and she's going to talk to us about energy saving within the business.
Hello, my name's Rachel Hodge. I'm the Communications Manager for E.ON's Sustainable Energy business. We're a UK business that focuses on energy efficiency and local generation to reduce costs and carbon for our business-to-business clients. Sustainable Energy is a total solution provider working with organisations to deliver everything from consultancy to provide energy saving strategies to design, installation, operation and maintenance of energy efficient and renewable technologies. We have 5 divisions that provide expertise, and what we say is that we're technology agnostic. We provide the right solution for the client. We're not tied in with any particular manufacturer. We go for the right solution. Consulting is helping businesses lower their carbon emissions and their energy costs. Community energy is a means of delivering heat to homes and businesses from a central, locally sited energy centre to clients like Barratt's, Taylor Wimpey, St Modwin, Persimmon, and most leading house builders and commercial developers. The microgeneration team work with the private and public sector on large solar, biomass, wind and heat pump renewable energy projects. Housing associations have been a particularly large sector for sustainable energy. We've developed a strong tenant engagement programme. Infrastructure services install, operate and maintain low carbon street lighting that can save up to 70% in carbon and operating costs via 25-year PFI contracts with authorities like Blackpool, Stafford, Oldham and Rochdale. This area of the business also provides internal lighting and meter connections for businesses. Finally, our cities team was set up in recognition of the fact that tackling carbon and costs at city level is very effective, as it joins the private and public sector together to address planning, community energy and economies of scale that can be achieved by working with homes and businesses. We've partnered with 10 forward-thinking cities to help them to achieve their carbon reduction strategies for energy, and that's going really, really well. The reasons for saving energy are well known: to reduce carbon and costs. But more recently, organisations are becoming more aware of the value of local generation, as losses during transportation of gas and electricity are minimised and security of supply is increased. Many large and niche brands are using sustainability as a point of difference and as a means of showing corporate responsibility. Some are also mandated to save carbon to avoid taxes like the carbon reduction commitment that charges users £12 per tonne of carbon emitted. This slide compares the amount of energy we use across our businesses, and it highlights the largest amounts tend to be used in space heating and industrial processes. When you're looking to save in energy, the most cost-effective way to tackle cost and carbon savings, put simply, are to insulate, moderate and generate finally. Firstly, you insulate your building to ensure energy isn't flying out through the walls, roof or windows, which makes sense. So that's cavity wall, loft insulation and all of those measures. Then to moderate usage, this can be achieved through behavioural programs that encourage and congratulate staff for turning off lights, powering down laptops, etc. But moderation can also be achieved through more sophisticated energy efficiency controls and building management systems that can set the temperatures and lighting levels using automated systems. Homebase and Next work with our partner, 7 Controls, to control all of their UK stores and save 42% on their electricity consumption simply by reducing lighting levels before stores opened, which provided significant savings. Lastly, once you've addressed insulation and moderation, comes local generation from renewables like solar, biomass, wind, ground and air source heat pumps. But to go directly to generation before you've insulated or moderated would not be cost effective. The old cliche that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it is certainly true of energy. Once you know when and where you use energy, you're in a position to reduce consumption or introduce renewable sources. It sounds easy, but when you lease whole or part of a building or do not have sub-metering for different areas, it can be quite tricky. And it's worth considering a consultant to help you identify areas of improvement versus investment so that you can decide on your priorities based on the return on investment. Moderation is a starting point, whether this is through human action or controls. But we've also learned that explaining how renewables work and how they'll save costs is critical. When we installed solar panels onto 4,500 homes in the social housing sector, we provided information in bite-sized chunks at each step of the design, install and maintenance process, using things like postcards, calendars, microsites and open days. We were targeting tenants of social housing and giving them the opportunity to ask questions and get the most they could from their solar panels. And this is true of employees and homeowners. If they understand how renewables work, they'll get more from it. Lighting is a quick win in energy saving as it's relatively easy to identify improvements and to install, whether that's internal lighting or car park lighting. Daylight tube systems, like the one pictured on the left of this slide, use natural daylight to supplement artificial light, and therefore the amount of light intensity can be reduced at installation, so you may need less lights installed. And the daylight as the daylight increases, control takes artificial light down or up. A system that uses LED lighting and daylight tubes and controls can save up to 80% on energy within an office environment. In an office that we worked on, the occupants really wanted to move to the office with the new system as they saw the improvement in the quality of light, so much more daylight coming in. And to microgeneration, it's an ideal retrofit solution for existing buildings. This image shows the multiple generation technologies that can be used together to improve the efficiency of a whole building. We're currently working with schools and leisure centres to move them from gas to biomass boilers, as this not only reduces carbon, in this leisure centre example it saved 258 tonnes of carbon, it also saves costs as this organisation no longer has to pay the carbon reduction commitment on their heating system, which, as I talked about earlier, is the mandated tax on carbon emitted at £12 per tonne. We talk about carbon savings all the time, but what does 258 tonnes equate to? It's always good to translate carbon into something that most people can relate to, and that's as important at the design stage to justify your investment as it is at the stage where you're communicating improvements that you've made to staff, suppliers and customers. At our head office, we display our solar array generation on large screens in real time so that people can see how much we're generating at any particular moment. In the current economic climate, energy saving is vital as it reduces the cost of energy. But with some of the more advanced methods of cutting costs and carbon, justifying capital on new equipment can be a big issue, as technologies can be expensive. That's why understanding funding streams puts businesses at a massive advantage when they're looking for cost savings and CSR and brand benefits from sustainability. Enhanced capital allowances are available on Carbon Trust approved low carbon equipment to improve a company's tax position. The feed-in tariff, which pays a pence per kilowatt price on solar generated, has recently been reduced, but it can still provide a boost to payback on equipment, and householders who receive a higher rate than businesses are using it as an investment, as returns can be better than interest in a bank account. The renewable heat incentive pays the commercial sector for heat generation from renewables, such as biomass, ground source heat pumps. Some companies like E.ON are using the incentive to pay up front for new technologies so that our clients get free equipment in return for paying a price for heat over a contract, and that is usually 15% cheaper than the original price that they paid for gas. They're saving about 15% on their heat production, but they're paying no upfront costs for technologies. Energy performance contracts are another innovative funding mechanism and something you'll probably hear a lot more about in the future. The technologies are paid for by the supplier upfront, so there are no initial capital costs, and the client pays back for the technology as they save energy. So if you don't save the energy, then you don't pay back the capital, so it's a win-win situation there. The savings are guaranteed, and once the equipment is paid for, the saving advantage is taken by the business. So, to summarise, the future of decentralised energy is to produce low-carbon energy from a local, low-carbon source, whether that be combined heat and power, biomass, or energy from waste. It then needs to be linked across the network of heat pipes to private and public sector buildings, as this not only provides economies of scale for heat through an increased demand, but also reduces the relative cost of the heat network versus buildings supplied. E.ON is already supplying large new build developments in this way. In Exeter, we're building an energy centre that will supply 3,500 homes and 1.4 million square feet of commercial and retail space. The carbon savings of 13,000 tonnes a year will be equivalent of taking 5,200 cars off the road. And we have another 15 other similar developments across the UK. So that was a quick roundup on energy efficiency and local generation. There's a lot to it, and if you'd like to ask any energy-related questions, please send them in. I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Rachel. The team's doing some really good work on sustainable cities and the future of the smart grid. Definitely worth talking to them about the things that they're doing there. And we're really enjoying working with the team with their communications. So now I'm going to hand you over to Tony, who's going to talk to us about water savings.
My name is Tony Reinberg, and I'm Marketing Manager of Ideal Standard. My talk today is on the subject of water, one of the world's most precious resources, but one in the UK we often take for granted. I'll be showing where our water goes, how we use it, and explaining some of the ways we can save water by installing more water-efficient equipment and changing people's behaviour. On average in the UK, we consume around 150 litres of water per person per day. However, there is a big mismatch between what we actually use and what people believe they use. Our research shows that 42% of people have no idea on the amount of water they consume each day, and those who do believe they only use around 40 litres. Water is precious. It may cover 71% of the Earth's surface, but millions of people lack safe access to water, and only a fraction of it is drinkable. Part of the UK have less water than a Sudan or Istanbul, and low rainfall last winter has caused drought conditions in many regions of the UK. So where does our water go? This chart shows that 66% of the water we use in the UK comes from a bathroom. 30% alone is flushed down the toilet, and 33% from washing, bathing and showering. Our water may be potable, but in fact only 5% is actually drunk. The good thing is there are many ways in which an organisation can reduce their water usage. This can be by implementing major changes, such as systems to recycle grey water or rainwater harvesting, or by installing more efficient water products in the bathroom, in the washroom. The key to begin saving water is to understand where water currently goes. And for that, you need to carry out an audit to see which areas consume the most water and also monitor potential leakages in the system. As well as looking at the equipment, organisations should look at their cleaning regimes and how they can recover water from their manufacturing processes. What is important is that any actions are meaningful. Product innovation can provide more efficient water-saving products, but it is equally important that we don't take away the pleasure of bathing, but rather change people's attitudes and behaviours so they begin thinking about their water usage. A low water tap is all very well, but not very useful if it is left running unchecked. An earlier slide showed how 30% of domestic water is flushed down the toilet. In fact, this is reducing as we see more efficient toilets being developed. However, there are still many high-volume flushing toilets still installed in the UK. Some toilets will still be using up to 13 litres of water per flush. From 1999, all new toilets have to flush on a maximum of 6 litres of water. However, recent developments have allowed more efficient toilets, and there are WCs that will flush on as little as 4 litres for the main flush and 2.6 for the small flush. Here you can see the effect of different capacity toilets on the amount of water we use each day and the costs incurred. For instance, a 12-litre flushing system will use 72 litres of water per person per day. That's over 24,000 litres of water per year, compared to less than 6,000 litres per year for a water-efficient 2.6-litre flushing toilet. People often believe that the volume of water improves the performance of a toilet. In fact, that isn't necessarily true. A larger flush will compensate for a poorly designed toilet, but a well-designed toilet can operate very effectively on low water volumes. All ideal standard toilets have to pass stringent tests before they're launched on the market. Water is lost through high-flow taps as well. At ideal standard, we now supply the majority of mixers with 5 litres per minute flow regulators. This reduces the flow rate whilst maintaining efficiency. In addition, a regulated mixer reduces the chance of splashback. Within an organisation, consider using sensor taps that only operate when a user is present, or self-closing taps that turn off automatically after a predetermined time period. This chart shows how regulated taps give a consistent flow of water up to high pressures, as opposed to flow restrictors which simply reduce the flow but still waste water when the pressure goes up. A recent innovation from Ideal Standard is the Ceramix-based blue basin mixer. This tap has a special water channel that reduces the amount of water passing through the tap. The mixer is regulated to 5 litres per minute, and the smaller channel speeds up the time to obtain hot water by 7 seconds. Independent tests have shown savings of £150 a year for a domestic user. So eco-taps save the environment and water bills. Urinals can consume a lot of water if they are unregulated. Indeed, an unregulated urinal that is left flushing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, will use more than 87,000 litres of water in a year. At the very least, an organisation should use a time flush system that operates in line with usage rates. However, a sensor urinal, or waterless urinal, would potentially save thousands of litres of water a year.
Thank you, Tony. That's excellent. Remember, if you've got any questions for Tony or any of the other speakers today, just remember to pop them in and use that sustainability hashtag. So further information and resources, if you want to contact us or any of the other speakers, so we're at think-sustainability.co.uk. The E.ON Sustainable Energy team, there's the link there. Same with RAP and their advice line. Lots of helpful advice available on that. Ideal Standards and IEMA. There's links there through to becoming an IEMA member and working through their training syllabus as well. All very helpful and something that I've done myself for several years. So the upcoming webinars that we've got, the next one is being run predominantly by Cranfield University, as well as a couple of other great case studies called Improving the Sustainability of Offerings. That's next Thursday, same time. That's going to look at product and service design, some really good quality content in there. Then we go on to effective green marketing, which I'll lead with a case study for 3663. We're going to talk about all the things that make sure we avoid greenwash. We really substantiate our green marketing communications well. We produce them with as lower impacts as possible and take them to market in ways that really kind of gain that ROI and the engagement of all parties. Then we have Liz Mail Consulting, as well as our digital specialist online for the 4th webinar on 7th of June. And finally, the last one sees Clarity Eurostar and a couple of other great case studies talking about CSR people can engage with and broaden that out from the regular CSR reporting. So now we will answer some of your questions that you've sent in. So I've distributed those out to the speakers and they're going to pick those up over the course of the next few minutes. If you sent in a question that we haven't or don't get time to cover today, we will make sure that we pick this up either on Twitter or by contacting you after the webinar to make sure that you get a response suitably to those. Thank you.
Now we've got a couple of questions in from you in terms of my presentation. So what I'd like to do is just to go through those and attempt to answer them as best as I can. So first of all, then I've got one here that says I have limited amount of time for implementation of such projects. And how do you suggest that I maximise my impact on managing our waste? And what can I do in order to focus that in? Now, good question. I mean, in terms of maximising your impacts, then it depends on your organisation and the size of organisation that you are. Now, in terms of limited time, fundamentally what I would start off with is I would start off by looking in your organisation at identifying some really nice quick wins, some low cost, no cost activities that you can do very quickly by changing just the way people do things that will reduce the amount of waste that you're producing. Thinking about the resources and impacts that you're having, thinking about those resources and how you can just change some simple processes. You know, whether that's little things like, for example's sake, in terms of water, putting a trigger gun on the end of a hose pipe so the hose pipe doesn't leak water continuously across a yard. Thinking about cleaning processes instead of having a man. A lot of businesses have got them, and certainly my business activities, we certainly had them. The man that can shoot a piece of paper from one end of the yard to the other and get it within 2 foot of the wheelie bin with a hose pipe, just in order to clean up and jet wash the yard. Thinking about those processes and how you can do those cleaning processes easier and simpler without the utilisation of water, whether that's just the provision of a brush or in a factory environment, squeegee cleaning, and thinking about those sort of things will help you to make some quick wins. If you make quick wins in your organisation, that then you capture the impact of those savings. By doing it in that way, then what you can do is then capture those savings, monitor the impact and record the impact that you've had, and then that gives you the message that you need in order to go to your senior management and staff to talk about the resources and things that you need in order to expand your activity and engagement further. So thinking about those quick wins, thinking about how you can do it. Now within that also think about how those simple things that you can do that require just the changes of behaviour amongst your staff. What is the processes? What are they doing that is creating the waste? Thinking about how you can change those behaviours, how you can influence them, will help you in order to help you to target some of those quick wins, because getting staff on side and getting the team involved in what you're doing and getting them to do the work for you is core to it. Because as these programs develop, you really need their engagement. Nobody knows a process that creates waste better than the person doing the process. So if you want them to tell you what's wrong and where the inefficiencies are in what you do as a business, ask the people that are doing them to target you in. Well, those sort of things will be a core way in terms of helping you to target in the benefit, get staff involved in what you're doing, but also by capturing the impact, capturing those savings, and capturing the true cost of waste on your organisation will enable you to upscale what you're doing and get the resource and time that you need in order to expand and to develop your engagement further. The second question that we've had here is, how do I target my activities on the right resources? How do I know which is the important ones within my organisation? Now this one's relatively straightforward and simple, but actually what's needed in order for you to do it is the pre-runner to that, the actual identification. Now there is a RAP publication on waste mapping and waste resources, and an e-publication which will be coming online very, very shortly on how to do this. And what you need to do is you need to identify and take a walk around your site and identify where waste is being produced. When you identify where waste is being produced, it might be a particular process that generates waste, or a particular part of a process that generates waste. A piece of equipment, when you turn it on, it never works properly. It never produces what you need for the first 5 minutes, or until it warms up in terms of plastics and extrusion processes. Or it might be a particular the amount of material that's coming in on site. So it's the amount of packaging you're accepting into your business within your products and services. Identifying those, and then when you've identified those, what you then have the ability to do is then go and talk to purchasing and talk to the team and actually identify the costs of those resources on your business. And identify those costs. Once you've identified those costs, you then identify the cost of disposal to you as an organisation. So some materials, you might have relatively low volumes of materials, such as we looked in the presentation, we talked about oily rags and how instead of having tissues, the company moved to oily rags and cotton rags for recovery, so they could then recycle them. Those paper towels they were utilising were costing them more money to dispose of because they were special waste. So by recycling and by creating a product they could then reuse after cleaning processes, they actually then are able to actually reduce the amount of waste. That hazardous waste that they were disposing of was then eliminated, reducing a significant amount of cost from disposal of that hazardous waste. So looking at how you're managing waste, what those materials are, how much those materials are costing you in the first place, but also how much they're costing you to dispose of, will help you to prioritize out your targets and your materials that you want to be utilizing. So it's a balance between the two, the cost of materials and the cost of disposal that you want to be looking at in terms of making sure that you're focusing in on the right resources over time.
Okay, I've just had a question come in that says, what is the most typical high usage water area in an organisation? Well, I guess the answer to that, this will depend on the organisation, and the different organisations will have different usage patterns, but probably typically the area of biggest usage within a washroom is going to be around urinals and around the toileting area. Your urinals, particularly if they're not regulated, can use a huge amount of water, and it is probably one of the quickest, most efficient ways to cut down on water, either by putting in a time flow system or by putting in some form of waterless urinal. And likewise, toilets, again, which could be flushing on high capacity, it's probably best to start looking at introducing reduced water toilets.
Well, I've just been sent in a question asking me about energy performance contracts. The question is surely they're too good to be true. Well, we often do get that sort of feedback from our clients. But how it works is we finance the equipment up front and then take a long-term commitment on that capital, because we're confident that the energy savings will pay back the capital. And it's just a way of borrowing money over a long period, but not taking any risk up front, and being confident that as you save energy, you'll have to pay back the initial investment. But if you don't save energy, then you won't have to pay it back. It is guaranteed. So that obviously means that as E.ON, we have to make sure that the equipment we're putting in and the technologies that we're recommending are absolutely going to deliver what we say they're going to deliver, or we don't get paid back.
Thank you for everybody for attending today's webinar, for your questions and comments. Thank you to our speakers for their contributions. Some really helpful stuff in there. And if you know anybody in CSR, environmental or marketing that would find it useful to attend the following 4 webinars, make sure you share the details with them, and we look forward to seeing you next week, same time, same place. Thank you. Have a good week. Bye-bye.